My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. Happy Friday, everybody. First week without football. This sucks. No Callow today either. He's on a mini bye himself. No Caps with all the Four Nations stuff going on, so he's taking a little respite. Rest his brain, playa. So me and you today. And I got a few things I want to talk about, and I want to start going through free agents that are realistic, possible, and potential targets for the Commanders. And I want to specifically talk about three positions today, the ones that I think of all the areas of, potential upgrade for Washington to think about and for AP to go through. These are the three that really stand out to me. It doesn't mean that they won't upgrade at potentially tight end or corner or running back, but I think we can all agree offensive line, edge rush, obviously dependent on how they feel about John Allen's contract moving forward, potentially interior defensive line as well, maybe linebacker if Bobby Wagner isn't coming back. Even if he is, there might be a younger player coming in as well, et cetera, et cetera. I think we can all see that there are three positions that are definitive needs and places that they will chase: wide receiver, edge rush, and I think tackle. But the tackle market is limited at best. So why don't we get to that one last? Because I'm not sure which way they're going to go when free agency opens, if they are going to target one of the two or three players that look like viable replacements or upgrades to the offensive line. What I also don't know is where Brandon Coleman fits into all of this. So we'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about the two spots where there are options in free agency and specifically on offense at receiver. So Terry McLaurin's back. Luke McCaffrey is back as a draft pick, special teamer, potentially increases a role. I think I talked about this last week when I got to meet his dad, Ed McCaffrey, the former NFL player, obviously his dad. And we were on Radio Row and he did an interview and we were talking afterwards. And Luke, apparently, and I'm not surprised by this because of, just the background of what we know about him, he was asked to learn every single position at the wide receiver position last year, which I think partially may be part of why he didn't settle into any one particular one. And as the season's progressing and they're finding production out of Noah Brown for a while as the quote-unquote number 2 receiver, or De'Ami Brown late as the number 2 receiver, or got some contributions out of guys like Jamison Crowder when he came back off IR, or Olamide Zaccheaus throughout the year, that there wasn't quite the role that materialized for him. So I'm open to the idea that he has a more defined role offensively outside of probably special teams next year, but I'm open to the idea that he has a defined role. Does that mean he becomes the quote-unquote, and we're no longer in this idea that they have a number 2 by committee? I have a hard time believing that, but I'll wait to see how much he progresses in year one. He's a keeper, obviously. The question is, where and how does he get utilized in the offensive game plan? So I mentioned all these other receivers, the ones that were on the team this year. KJ Osborne, who was brought in late because of injuries, specifically to Noah Brown. He's a free agent, didn't end up playing very much for the teams. How open they are to trying to bring him back. Olamide Zaccheaus was someone that had some impactful plays at times, is a player that they love because of his competitive drive. Dan Quinn brought him up over and over and over. I don't think he's an expensive returnee. And so I would look at him as someone who is probably, I would expect, to return next year for them. He also took over punt return duties. He did not do poorly at that. I know he had a bad game where he had a fumble in it, but people talked about him like he wasn't productive at it. He actually was in the top 10 of punt returns, so he was doing okay. Could they upgrade at that position? Maybe. Does McCaffrey feel that? Maybe. Do they find someone else who feels that? Maybe. But I look at Zaccheaus as a probable candidate, as a returnee, probably on a short-term deal and probably not a lot of money deal. Jamison Crowder in his 30s now, question mark. I don't know where they stand on him. Noah Brown, who I thought performed really well for them, really kind of fit in for them, I think is a potential candidate to return on the assumption that the internal injuries that he suffered late in the season that forced him to miss the rest of the season are going to be recoverable and he'll be okay and back by the offseason training program and all of that stuff. So he's another one what I would look at. What is the price point? Is it a short-term deal? That's a possibility to me. De'Ami Brown is the one who I think might see some interest on the open market. And he did kind of emerge late in the season. Cliff Kingsbury talked about him as someone who grew in his quote unquote professionalism as the season went along. And so are they open to bringing him back? Yeah. But as we're talking this through, clearly they're not bringing everybody back. There is an upgrade that is going to happen because I'm going to go through the list, and the list is long at free agent where they can find really notable upgrade type players. So in De'Ami's case, it may come down to price point. It may come down to his willingness to want to come back. Does he want to know what his role is? Is he offered a little bit more money to have a defined role somewhere else? That's, I think, the more likely conclusion for him. And as the team thinks about paying somebody or paying a couple of receivers to come in and compete, I feel like he likely is odd man out, but we'll see what happens. I know they ended up liking him, and I know he ended up making a lot of big time plays, and I know they like his makeup for how competitive he is and how much he blocks on the edge and all of that type of stuff. So we'll have to see. So Zacchaeus, maybe. Noah Brown, maybe. Those would be the two probables. De'Ami, I would describe it as probable but unlikely, and Crowder, I would think they're going to move on to probably either someone younger or someone who can help more on offense than maybe he did. The high-end ones are the ones, obviously, everyone's paying attention to, and notably is T. Higgins. So T. Higgins posted something on Instagram, and it insinuated that he wants his options to be open. They are. We don't know what the Bengals are going to do in terms of potentially franchising him. I suppose that could happen this year. They could propose a sign and trade, or they could just let him walk and take the compensatory. The idea that they're paying him and Chase in the same offseason, even as much as Joe Burrow is kind of pounding the desk to get that done, feels unlikely to me and would be different than the way the Bengals have operated, where they would throw a lot of money out in one single offseason. They're going to have to pay Chase like the highest paid receiver in the NFL or something close to it, to whatever makes him happy, and he deserves to get a contract like that. Are they really going to put out two large contracts like this? Everyone seems to doubt it. So Higgins is available. The question you need to ask yourself, and he is, at his age, 26, in the prime of his career, most viable, massive upgrade player, but do you want to pay him what is going to be probably the 28 to 30 million plus number that he's going to get? If somebody views him as a number one receiver, he's going to go over 30 million annual average value contract. They already have Terry McLaurin under contract. I suppose they could work with him to try to rework his contract to make room for Higgins to come in. And it would be like a 1 and 1A situation. Higgins, obviously would be a massive upgrade for them. Does anyone typically view him, though? I kind of categorize him not unlike Brandon Ayuk a year ago. I think he's a really, really good player. Is he truly worth the Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, what Chase is going to get type of money? And because he's the best on the market, he may get that from somebody. And I don't know how Adam Peters and the Commanders are going to feel about paying someone. I don't know if overpaying is the right word, but putting someone in a category that might be just about a tier above from what he is. So I don't think it's likely that they go after him, albeit they can afford to bring him in. And I do think that they do need to upgrade the position. So they have a lot of questions to answer here, which is why I look at the long list at receiver and think they might be able to get 2 or 3 other veteran receivers, or a combination of a draft pick, high-ish draft pick, and a good veteran or 2 to try to stopgap their way again to building out a receiving core. If you give Higgins this type of money and you give him a long-term contract, you're basically saying he's your number 1 for a length of time, and we'll see how they handle Terry from there. Terry, at the salary he's at and the salary he's going to command moving forward, makes it hard to believe that there will be 2 of them on this roster at the same time. So Higgins, to me, is unlikely to end up coming here. but they may think differently about it and they may value it because when you look at the other positions of need where they can have a big impact upgrade, he screams the one you could do that with and alter the explosiveness of your offense. There are other higher tier like receivers that are out there. Keenan Allen's one of them. Older, probably ending up in the Hall of Fame, had a wonky year in Chicago after a great career with the Chargers, is available, older, would be short term. What's the price point on him? Like, I would want to know, what's the price point on him? Good veteran, competitive player, precise route runner. I think that that's a good mix for Washington. If they're not going to go the route of trading for Deebo Samuel or Cooper Kupp, here are the guys who are free agents. Allen's price point will be important here. What can he command on the open market? And if it's a quote-unquote deal that slots him in, I like him as a short-term option for Washington. Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs obviously went to Maryland. In the past, when things got weird in Minnesota before he went to Buffalo, he had hinted through social media he would want to play here. He had one season in Houston. Things seem to be going, I guess, fine enough. Obviously, he had a great run in Minnesota and a great run in Buffalo. He's over 30 now. And you have to start asking the question, what are you going to get out of him? And what's the price point again? He took a bet on himself type deal with the Texans to get to free agency and see what the next contract looks like. If he's commanding or wants to in the T. Higgins neighborhood, for me, it's a pass. If he's willing to go on a 1 or 2 year deal, it's a maybe. It's a maybe. It's, to me, unlikely to be the person that they would pursue, but I'm open to it. Amari Cooper's an interesting name. Amari Cooper obviously played in Dallas before he went to Cleveland and then ultimately Buffalo in a midseason trade as they started to move away from some of the salaries because they're in a cap situation, i.e. why Myles Garrett, may or may not be traded. Whether they want to get rid of him or not doesn't even matter at this point. Like, they may not be able to do it as the way things stand because of the way their cap is scheduled, but that's another issue. In terms of Amari Cooper, here's someone who Quinn and Witt probably have a little bit of experience with. They certainly know about his character. They know what kind of explosiveness he brings. Aging up now, so we're not talking about a long-term fix. But once again, if this was a short-term deal, and if the price point isn't overly high, he's a short-term fix at an explosive, with an explosive capability player. The other one is Chris Godwin, who now that Tampa Bay has settled on paying Mike Evans and keeping him for the long term, and they drafted Jalen McMillan, I think it's unlikely that he will come back. He suffered a really bad leg injury in the middle of last year. So that's question one. When is he available? And then question two is, what is his price point? Godwin, of all of that group that I named, if the price point is right, is the one that I would pursue. This is, of course, without knowing the physical injury stuff. So I don't know where he stands on all of that. So without knowing that part, when's he going to be available? Would it be in the OTAs or by training camp bare minimum? I think he's a massive upgrade. What's the price point for him? I don't know. And I think I'd want to know what the price point is before we get to the list of players where you could get pretty good deals to upgrade the core itself, to bring in people that may or may not have, 1 to 2, 3 year runs with your team as you try to build out a young receiving core. Godwin's the one that stands out to me that I have a lot of interest in. If the physical part of it is looking fine, he'll be fine. What is his price point? Is he looking for something and can get something on the market that is over $20 million a year? If that's the case, I'm not sure I'm into that because I don't know if I want the risk. But if it's lower than that, he's the one that I'd want to talk to and see what does that cost? What's the price point? I like him a lot. Cooper is all price point to me. Allen is, can you get a deal because he's a veteran who wants to play in a place where he thinks he might have a shot to win? Higgins is the one where I go, is this the splash we're taking? Do we want to make him a pseudo number one? Do we want to pay him like that? Because there's going to be a lot of competition on the open market for him. And that's why I don't think they're going to go that way. The list is long at receiver. Hollywood Brown is available. He's only 27 now. He's speed receiver. Never really emerged as a true number one, but we're not asking him to do that. Would he fit here? I don't know. The price point will be good. Darius Slayton, who had a really good run with the New York Giants, is a downfield deep threat. Is potentially, I guess it depends how you view it. Is he an upgrade from Noah Brown or De'Ami Brown? Maybe. He certainly has been over Diami, a lot more consistent in his play, at least with the Giants. And we know this for years and years of having average, quarterback play to now when we have, superstar quarterback play. He thrived in all of that and was a very good receiver. Only 28. If the price point isn't crazy, I'd want to consider him as an outside threat type option, as a stopgap type option for them. And I think that he could fit for them in that way. Demarcus Robinson is 30 now, performed really well with the Rams as a number 3 for them. I'm surprised they haven't wanted to re-sign him, but it does feel like change going on there. They're going to allow Cooper Kupp to seek a trade. We'll see what that looks like. Puka Nacua is clearly their number 1. There's a lot of smoke about Matthew Stafford and his future in Los Angeles. And if they're going to change that stuff out, then maybe re-signing 30-year-old receivers kind of isn't their thing right now. They might be heading towards a reset type of thing if they're not going to re-sign Stafford. So we'll have to see where Robinson fits and all that. And again, I'd go back to what's the price point for someone like that? Big target. Didn't have a really big target like that on this team. Does he fit for a year or two? Rondale Moore, he's the Curtis Samuel of this particular group. He's someone who can be utilized in a variety of different ways, can be effective at times. I think the price point is low. And if you're looking for a gadgety type of receiver, maybe he's the right one. McCole Hardman, great run with the Chiefs, who didn't with Mahomes as quarterback. Speed player, they value that. Went to the Jets, had a terrible year, went back to the Chiefs, had a bunch of injuries. I'd like to know physically where he is. But again, this could be a very cheap upgrade for speed and explosiveness on the outside and not paying a lot. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had a terrific year with New Orleans, even with all the quarterback issues that they had. He was the biggest problem that, like we talked about going into the New Orleans game in December, getting up there near close to 30 again. This guy's a pro receiver. Do you want another pro receiver out there with Jaden Daniels? I would say yes, especially if the price point's really low. So he's someone that I would look at. Juju Smith-Schuster is out there as well. Kind of been around the block a million times. I'd be more inclined to go towards the Valdez-Scantling, who's actually been productive in the last couple of years while moving around, if that's the direction you want to go. And then there's Nick Westbrook-Akine, who was in Tennessee. He's only 28 years old, has moments where he, beats you over the top. Again, does someone like this go to a different place and have a little bit better of an impact because of better quarterback play around him? It's an interesting question to ask, and the price point on him is going to be very low. I think my point is this. There are a lot of options at wide receiver for Washington this year, and they should really think long and hard about it. I know everybody's kind of pining for them to take a big swing. I would love that big swing to be pull off a trade for Myles Garrett. I think that would settle an issue on the defense that is necessary, and he's an elite top 5 pass rusher, one of the best players defensively in the NFL, clear position of need for the team. That's the swing I'd want them to get. Cleveland has to play ball. The compensation has to be right. They got to pay him, all that stuff. The pay him part I'm not worried about. The compensation part will be interesting to see how many teams really want him and what they're willing to give up. And will Cleveland ever turn the corner and be willing to trade him? There's a lot of steps to get around to that. That would be the swing that I'd want to see in the offseason before the draft. But short of that, then everyone else looks at T. Higgins and goes, that's the guy they should target. And if they get him, great. But I don't see it personally. I don't see it logically as the person that they're going to swing to pay that amount of money when you can turn around and maybe stopgap it with Godwin plus Valdez-Scantling, Amari Cooper plus Slayton, Keenan Allen plus Valdez-Scantling and Slayton. I want to see what they do with the receiving core. Are they willing to bring in some more of these veterans to try to upgrade the production from the position overall? And if they are willing to do that, then I think it gets around to you don't necessarily need to try to pay the price for a T. Higgins. You try to find your T. Higgins in the draft to pair with Terry, and then let Terry's career play itself out as he heads into his 30s as well. And you think about what does his contract look like. I'll be very interested to see how they handle that. The wide receiver position in free agency is actually quite deep. It does have one clear-cut top-tier name, Higgins, at the top, but there's a number of them that you could sell to me are really big upgrades for this team. Chris Godwin would be if he's healthy. Amari Cooper, I think, is in the short term, is a more explosive option than reliable explosive option than they've had. Keenan Allen, maybe less explosive, but certainly someone that has to be dealt with by defenses differently than maybe some of the other players they had. Diggs is I don't know how I feel about that. I'd have to talk to the front office to see how they feel about him, how he's bounced around, and obviously how publicly he is about his competitiveness on the sideline. And then there's all these others. Hollywood Brown is a speed threat. Does he click here? I don't know. It's probably his last chance to do so. Darius Slayton was actually very productive with the Giants. That's an upgrade to me for them to bring him in, especially if it's a stopgap situation. Westbrook-Akine might have something for you. Hardman might have something for you. Rondale Moore, if you're looking for someone to be gadgety like Austin Eckler can be for you, might have something for you. Valdez-Scantling, who they had high respect for when we played them in New Orleans back in December, maybe he's got one or two good competitive years in an offense like this where he can be a dangerous number 2 type target for them. DeMarcus Robinson, maybe for a year to bridge the gap. And then you have to think about, again, Zacchaeus, Crowder, Diami, Noah. If I had to guess, one or two of them would be back. Zacchaeus would be the most likely candidate to me. Diami would be the second on that list. And then Noah Brown. Let's see, is he healthy? Can he come back? And what does that look like? All right, let me take a quick break, and I want to get to the other major positions of need, tackle and edge. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Missing out on a show that everyone is talking about is not an option for me. I'm constantly signing up for this streaming service or that one, and then a few months later I realize I've been paying for this service long after I actually finished that show. Getting Rocket Money was a game changer for me. They'll find your unwanted subscriptions. They'll even help you cancel them, so you never have to worry about them slipping through the cracks. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. See all of your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where your money is going. For ones you don't want anymore, Rocket Money can help you cancel them. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. Easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help you keep your spending on track. See your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money is going. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/game on today. That's rocketmoney.com/game on. rocketmoney.com/game on.
If your football team had one option in their playbook, the results probably wouldn't be great. The same could be said for your investments. SIBO index options like SPX and XSP can help expand your investing strategies with cash settlement and potential tax advantages. If you're ready for a more dynamic game plan, head to betterwithoptions.com. SIBO, life is better with options. Your investments could be too. There are risks associated with SIBO company products. Review the disclosures and disclaimers at SIBO.com/US_disclaimers.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
All right, welcome back. Let's continue to go through what I think are the 2, or actually 3, major positions of upgrade that Washington's going to look at when free agency begins. We just went through the receivers, which, if you really go through the lists that are available, is really deep with really good options, even outside of the high price point player, T. Higgins, and potentially high price point players, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin. I'd very much want to see what their price points actually are. Let me focus in on a couple of the other groups. Edge rusher. So Washington not only, I think, would like an upgrade, they actually were able to manufacture a lot of sacks this season. They were top 10 in sacks this year. Dante Fowler had a double-digit sack year. Frankie Louvu, as a pseudo-rusher, had a good year. They got contributions from a number of different players. Dorrance Armstrong, I think, was exactly, with the exception of the middle of the season where he injured his rib and he was out for a couple games and kind of needed to get, back into shape for, the gameplay. I think he was exactly what they were looking for. He's an edge setter. He's a consistent player, but he's not a game changer. He's not going to post big numbers. They're looking for the big numbers on the other side. Myles Garrett is a home run if he somehow is acquired and comes here. Short of that happening, what you see on the, in options in free agency, and you'll see this at tackle too, these are premier positions where it is actually very hard to find players that are impact players in the open market. They typically get signed by their teams. Dante Fowler is up for a contract. I would like to think that Washington will bring him back, even if it's in a reduced role, than he was a year ago. I'd like to think that the impact he had, the history he has with Quinn and Witt, they know what he is. Even if it's in a reduced role, it would be one that I think could be impactful. I would want them to bring him back. Cleveland Farrell's contract is up after 1 year, kind of navigated the entire season with a knee injury, had a couple of big moments, but again, didn't really stand out on the field that much. Jalen Holmes, who they picked up in the middle of the year after the Jets had released him, had a few moments as well. Maybe he's a depth signing at edge rush. Maybe they bring him back because they liked what he did. But again, not unlike with receiver, is one of the three going to be back? Probably. Two of the three, probably not. So that's kind of how I kind of look at that position. But they need to upgrade that spot. And if Garrett truly is off the table, these are the names that are in free agency before we get around to the draft to see where are their options to go find a Jared Verse, if you will. The edge rusher with the probably biggest number coming his way will be Khalil Mack, who of course had, fantastic career as a high draft pick with the Raiders, ended up going to the Chargers for a number of years, and now is available. He's 33 years old. So if you are going to sign someone like that, it is going to be for a short-term 1 to 2 year deal. Probably a decent number attached to it, but a 1 to 2 year deal. To me, he is, if you're signing him, you're saying we don't really like what's on the market, but we need to get better where we are. And we're going to take a chance on him and play it out for a season and see how it goes. No harm, no foul if it doesn't turn out to be great, but maybe we hit a home run with him for a season or two, and he helps us as we try to find who is our standout edge rush type player. Hassan Reddick is available. Hassan Reddick reminds me a lot of Dante Fowler with probably bigger numbers throughout his career. He was a menace when he played for the Cardinals, and specifically we saw it with the Eagles. Then they traded him to the Jets, and he didn't want to go to the Jets, and he made that very difficult on them, and then eventually showed up in the middle of the season, and I don't remember calling it or hearing of a highlight with him, which, considering he didn't practice with the team the whole year, is not ultimately a surprise. I think he cost himself money, and I think he cost himself good graces of front offices who are going to try to trust him. He wants a contract. He wanted it from the Jets. He did not get it. Now at 30, what can he expect to get? I don't really know. And if his numbers are kind of out of line with what his market value is, then I think that's going to be a pass. And I think that's where I kind of stand on him. I would bring back Fowler and forego someone like Reddick. Mack feels like an upgrade if he still has the ability to give and produce the way that he did even at 33. DeMarcus Lawrence is going to be available. Let's see what the Cowboys do there. But at 32 and off of an injury-riddled season, I would lean back on Dan Quinn and Joe Witt, who know him, obviously, very well, and we know him having played against him. Do you think he can be the guy he was pre all these injuries for a 1 to 3 year period? And that's the decision you have to make at his age at 32. If they don't sign him, that'll tell you everything you need to know. I would assume that Lawrence wouldn't mind a reunion here, just not unlike the way Dorrance Armstrong didn't mind it or Dante Fowler didn't mind it. But I don't know that for sure. And this could be kind of like last year when we all were yelling, they need to upgrade a corner, you need to upgrade a corner, and they didn't go and sign Stephon Gilmore, who had played the season before in Dallas. I think it kind of just, silently tells you what the coaching staff thought of his ability at an advanced age. This will be a very telling one. Do they turn to him and say, we'll give you a 1 or 2 year deal? Does he have a market out there? Are there teams that look at him and saw the past and all the numbers that he's posted and go, we're going to give him a 2 year high number deal and take a chance with that? If that's the case, then I think we're going to pass in this situation. But if there's a quote unquote deal to be had, I need to know more about his injuries, obviously, and I need to know what Dan Quinn and Joe Witt think about him. Then I think there's a possibility just because of the relationship that they've had in the past. Josh Sweat, he's only 27, so he's the right age to make an investment. He's coming off the Eagles Super Bowl season. It's kind of just known. When I was in Radio Row talking to all the Philadelphia people who were all there, it was just kind of a known thing that he's going to hit free agency. They're not going to re-sign him, and they're going to hand him his ring and thank him for his service and just move on, which ought to be very telling about how they feel about him. Their money's going to need to be spent with Jalen Carter, obviously, but not for a couple more years. Probably Nolan Smith if he continues at the level. Nakobe Dean, probably. Obviously, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, those guys. So there's a lot of money that's coming down the road for them, but they don't have to deal with it now. And their salary cap is very anchored to their offensive players. Jalen Hurts makes a top 10 quarterback salary. Saquon Barkley, top 10 running back. A.J. Brown, top 10 receiver. Devontae Smith makes a lot of money. Their offensive linemen are paid very well. So the allocation of funds to a defensive end who's not a Myles Garrett or game-changing type player, but albeit very good player, is just not in the cards for them. And that's why he's going to be available. I think because of his age, he's going to have a very big market. Because of that, I think he's going to get a very nice contract. And I think the Eagles know this, and his representation knows this, which is why they probably slow rolled into the offseason. I'm sure the Eagles would have loved to have kept him at the right price, but they know the right price isn't going to exist for him. So I'm kind of crossing him off as a possibility for Washington, because I don't see Peters and Quinn and Witt saying, let's take a shot on a guy who we think is above average, but not game-changing great, and overpay him. And I think Josh Sweat's going to get a nice contract from somebody, and I'll be surprised if it isn't something that's robust and likely top of the market for the free agents at this position. And therefore, this is why I don't think he's going to for them. Marcus Davenport is only 28 years old, played for the Saints for a while, was with the Lions last year. I didn't see a lot of the impact that I'd seen in the past. He probably is going to have to play on a lower tier deal. That's going to be eye of the beholder for Washington. Do they like him? Do they think that there's possibility there? Do they think that's an upgrade? It probably is. What do they want to pay him? Do they bring him in for competition and depth because the price point isn't that high? I could see that. Charles Omenihu, who's only 27 from the Chiefs, also going to be available. Again, similarly, I think he falls into this category with a lot of these guys where you go, I think he's maybe better than what we have. I think he's an upgrade. I think he's a rotational piece, but I'm not paying for someone to be a difference-making player at a spot where they need a difference-making player. So can they get the right deal for him? Do they like him? Do they think he's an upgrade? Can they get the right price? I'd hear that out. But again, until I know, like what the price point is for a lot of these players, this is a premier position. It's hard to know if they'd go for really any of them. There is another name that's on the free agent list that I found interesting, and it's Azeez Ojulari, who played with the Giants, is going to be kind of odd man out here because they got Kayvon Thibodeau there and they just paid for Brian Burns. So they're not going to pay him too. What's the price on him? I'd like to know, because this guy, when healthy, is a really good, productive player. Now, he's not Myles Garrett, and he's not Khalil Mack at his best, and he's not one of those Nick Bosa. He's not one of these change the game type of edge setters. However, he is a deft pass rusher. And if you get people into third and longs, he is a younger version of Hassan Reddick. His price point, I'd like to know what it is, because he's someone that I have watched, through the years and think he's a very, very good, productive player. He was dealing with some injuries, but I feel like he's one that I would circle and want to know the price point of. Knows the division, has played in the division, very good player, just odd man out up there. What is his number? And he would be the one I'd look at. So of all this list of people, I think the answer here is, I think this is why I think everybody rightfully so should be looking at trying to acquire Myles Garrett, because he is a world above any of these names, even though many of them I think would be an upgrade for where Washington is. If you can't get Myles Garrett, do you want to get Hassan Reddick? I'd rather go with a younger, potentially cheaper Azeez Ojulari. Do you think DeMarcus Lawrence has what he had a couple of years ago in Dallas, even at 32? If that's the case, then that's a maybe, considering the relationships. Josh Sweat's price point is probably going to be higher than I think anybody really, really wants to be comfortable with, but someone's going to pay it because he's at that age, probably best in class, best option for you. Davenport, Omenihu, I don't really know. And so again, with receiver, similarly, Like when we talked about earlier, I think they can find some pretty good options to upgrade the receiving core and then hopefully find their next Harry in the draft. Edge feels even less like, again, I think there's some options to upgrade, but I don't know that I see the answer unless they somehow pull off the trade for Myles Garrett. So you're going to have to, I think this is a long way. Like, I know the Commanders are going to be aggressive in free agency and potentially in the trade market. All the reporting is going that way. And I think we all know that they have a window of opportunity with Jaden and a number of these players that if they fill some of these premier positions with upgraded talent, there's kind of a who knows feeling about where they could potentially go. And considering that they're chasing Philadelphia in Jaden's rookie contract, their roster has to improve to have any real shot. Like, I'm staring at this thing going, they could be the second best team in the NFC, if all things go well, and they're still getting road games because they're chasing down Philadelphia, who's got the best roster in football. So the mountain to climb is high for them because of the Eagles being in their division. So there's going to be pressure to do something about it. But if you really look at the options, you need to be careful and not just overpay anybody just because it's an upgrade. You want to make sure that you have the flexibility to add true difference makers when they come and as they come. And if you read the list of the players from the edge rushers, it's hard to pick any of them outside of you think Khalil Mack's going to have a great couple of seasons at 33 or DeMarcus Lawrence at 32 and go, those are difference-making players. So I think we have to be careful here. Ojulari's the one that I would be just interested in. What's the price? Bring him in. He's got some of that, he's got a little bit of that motor stuff that I think people like. And I'd like to just know what the price is there. All right, the other one we need to talk about is tackle, because I heard Logan Paulson talk about this. I've kind of felt this way too. Is Brandon Coleman long-term a left tackle for them? I don't know the answer to that. I'd like to ask Quinn, Kingsbury, Bobby Johnson, all them, how do they feel about that? Some of this will come down to what are your options. And I think when we go through this list, and it's really short of options on free agency, and that's not surprising because good tackles typically are not really available. It's a premier position that teams typically lock up. How they handle the draft at 29, if they just stay there, move up, move down, whatever, if their first or second round pick is earmarked for a tackle, well, then that ought to tell you how they pretty much feel about it. So there is a cap savings that could come if they were to release Andrew Wiley. A decent amount too, $5 to $7 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't have it in front of me, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. But do they have his replacement at right tackle? I don't know that they do. So let's say they re-sign Cornelius Lucas and they say, we think we could get the same, production out of him as we got out of Wiley. And that would, I'd have to talk to the coaches whether they felt that way. That settles right tackle. Or do we think Brandon Coleman is a guard? Do we think Brandon Coleman is a right tackle over a left tackle so he's not blocking the premier pass rushers on every single down? We stick him over there. I think Coleman is a keeper player. The question is, at what position is he best? Sam Cosmi started as a tackle. Brandon Sheriff started as a tackle, turned into a guard. Brandon Sheriff turned into an all-pro guard. Cosmi, I think, is heading that way, was having that type of season. That's why they paid him. Unfortunate part of the whole thing for next year is we're going to have to wait and see when he is healthy. Tyler Biotish is their center of the now and future for at least the next couple of years. Allegretti, I think, is a good player who really gutted out the season. Could they upgrade at that position? Maybe. Is that Brandon Coleman? Well, that would probably come down to who's the left tackle. Does that come in the draft? Does that come somewhere else? And when you read the list of free agents, yeah, there's a lot of tackles, but there are very, very few of them that you would look at and go, okay, I'm going to pay him the $20 range to bring him in here because he's going to be a difference maker. The two that are on the list that you have to watch for, Cam Robinson, played a long time in Jacksonville, ended up going to Minnesota in the middle of the year at trade deadline. He's 29 years old, good player. You're going to have to pay tackle money for him because he's the best on the board. And someone who needs him is going to pay tackle money for him. So you have to decide, do you want to do that? The other one's Ronnie Stanley, 30 years old, maybe second best tackle on the board. Is he, someone who's going to be as productive as he was previously in his career now? I don't know. And what's the number going to be for him? Because again, these are the two. If you go look at the list, there's a lot of tackles, but not many with names like this. These are the two that are out there. So Washington's kind of like, when we talk about they're going to upgrade, they're going to be aggressive, they're going to do these things, with who and at what price point for these players? I don't see this group at this point doing things that feel as if it's a reach. we're going to find out. I don't think the Lattimore one was a reach. We're going to find out next year if he can get healthy and get back to the play style and the production that he had prior to all the soft tissue injuries that kind of limited him this year, last year, and obviously in his attempt to return to the field against Washington. I think the jury's out on that. Still, they gave up a third-round pick. They're paying the salary. That was the first real, put themselves out there type of deal that they've done. In all of these things, in edge and tackle, they both feel like if they were to go and get one of these guys and got him at a semi-market price point, it would be the first time that they kind of put themselves out there to take a risk on a player that they can't possibly think is a slam dunk, but they're hopeful. And considering how many hits they had last year, but all the hits, all of them, were all on low-term, low money type deals. They never really paid an extraordinary amount for anybody. 1-year deal Wagner, 1-year deal Ertz, 2-year deal Eckler, but the price is affordable. Dorrance Armstrong got a multi-year deal, but not at a high price point, at the price point that he probably belongs at. Frankie Louvu was a hit for them, and the price point is not ridiculous. He's not in the top 5 of middle linebackers or linebackers, making that kind of money. Lattimore is the first real reach that they went for. This year, if we're asking them, okay, who are you going to reach for? Name me the people on the list that you'd go, I definitively would throw the money down on that particular person. I think they're going to sign a couple of these names. Receiver, potentially tackle, less likely, but potentially edge. I think they're going to sign 1 or 2 of these people, maybe more, and bring some of these guys in. The question is, are any of them going to get the reach type of deal/money? And that's a wait to be seen. One other position real quick was Zach Ertz. I talked about this, after the season ended. I loved what he did this year. I'd like to have him back. But I've kind of couched it with, I think this team needs to get explosive playmakers. And I really don't care which position group it comes from, receiver, tight end, or running back. They just need to find some more explosiveness. I like B-Rob and Eckler, but can they get more explosive there? I like Terry, but can they get more explosiveness out of the wide receiver 2, 3, 4, whatever it may be? Tight end's similar to me. I like what Ertz did this year. I'd hoped Sinnott would come along a little bit further than he did. I like Bates, who is a free agent, but he's an inline blocker more than he is a receiver. Can they actually get more explosiveness out of the tight end position? And there is a name on the list of free agents that I think is worth at least watching and pursuing potentially. It's Mike Gesicki, who had a really good run in Miami, and then they moved away from him, and he was kind of in the wilderness. He had a really good year with Burrow, up in Cincinnati, and he's available now. Do you perceive that as a receiving target upgrade from Ertz, or not enough that you would replace Ertz with him? So I want to see what happens with Zach Ertz. I didn't know premier tight ends that were available as well. But that was a name that stood out to me. And I think it's one to watch here as we head towards free agency too, because I like Zach Ertz. I don't think it's a slam dunk they bring him back. I do think it's very possible they will bring him back. But if something comes along that ups the explosiveness at the position for a younger player, even if it's only a few years younger, I wonder if they'll opt to go that way. And Gesicki's name just stood out. Largely, I would just say this in kind of going through this exercise. I think this team's still going to have to build through the draft, and potentially a couple of trades, but build through the draft. And if you're looking for the aggressive all-in, they're going to really flip this roster around and make it more dynamic, name me the people that I just read to you that you think they should do that for that would accomplish that goal. And I think you're going to have a hard time coming up with that case. So are there going to be a lot of new people? Is some money going to get spent? Probably at receiver, maybe at edge, potentially a tackle. I think unlikely, but possibly a tight end. Yes. I think they are going to be players in free agency. Are we expecting that to flip this roster on its head and make it extraordinarily competitive among the best in the NFL? I think that's a big ask of Peters and Newmark and company. So I think we need to think of it in that context. And we still need to consider the draft is where they're going to find their next group of playmaking players that will, hopefully, accelerate the roster they already have. I think we're in a similar situation we were in a year ago. They need to find some guys to bridge some gaps in some roster spots where there are holes, and I think there's options for that. But I think they need to think of it that way. All right, be right back. Bram watch the show. ESPN 630 Sports Capital.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. To check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus and present in Virginia. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, welcome back. Callow and I yesterday talked a lot about Travis Kelce and what his future will be. We went through, I think you probably have all seen these clips on the internet now, a couple replays from like all 22 style films from the Super Bowl where Kelce just looked totally disengaged in this one particular play. Like Mahomes is doing the Mahomes stuff. He's running around, he's trying to make a play, and Kelce's like literally standing there, like near the line of scrimmage, not blocking anybody, not trying to get open, like nothing. He isn't really doing anything. He admitted on New Heights, the podcast he shares with his brother Jason, that he didn't play his best, and he was apologizing for it, and he said it was, the worst the team had played, but he personally didn't play very well, and then went on to talk about how he's going to think about what his future is and whether he's going to retire. I had mentioned this the other day, like I saw Ryan Clark say something like he's going to have to be okay being an average player and not a great player, as he heads into what is going to be the Hall of Fame at some point in time with all the wins he's had and the numbers he's broken. He's just had a great career, but in his mid-30s, it kind of feels like it's the end, or you feel like you're watching it. Now, he may come to terms and say, I don't want to go out like that, and he wants to keep playing, and I wouldn't blame him. I mean, how long, why wouldn't you want to keep playing with Pat Mahomes? He's, maybe the best quarterback ever. He's the best one of his current generation. So I think it's hard to walk away, obviously, from something like that. So we'll just have to see where he lands on it. But I wanted to read this piece. I kind of referenced it yesterday. I want to read this piece from Awful Announcing, which does, a major blog into sports media. And they wrote this about Jason Kelce and what was the end of essentially year one of him being a prominent figure in NFL coverage, let alone any real coverage. And they go through the whole background of what it took to get him to sign there and that he was very sought after. And he ended up choosing ESPN. And he was going to be a prominent figure on some of the pregame shows, probably the postgame shows. And then they were going to give him a late night show. They call it Late Night with Jason Kelce. And they kind of sum it up this way. And I agreed with the way they put this. It's not to say that Kelce's been bad as an analyst. He's been perfectly fine, perhaps even good, but it's hard to imagine executives in Bristol feel like they got the bang for their buck in year one of the Jason Kelce era, in which memorable moments proved few and far between. And they named a couple of these moments, and even one of them was one that wasn't even really on ESPN. It was the one where he knocked the cell phone out of the guy's hand, and because he was taping him, and he said some rude stuff to him, and that became a viral moment. And then he ended up going on ESPN and kind of apologizing for his actions. But there were a couple of others that were somewhat notable. But unlike McAfee or Stephen A. Smith, there aren't all these moments that are piling up that are running into your feeds, which is the way people consume media now and draw people back, hopefully, to it's the chum to bring the fish back to the main network. Anyway. They go on to say this, and they listed a few of the moments. They said, I keep mentioning moments because that's presumably what ESPN brought Kelce on board to create. Any number of ex-NFL players can break down film and dish hot takes. It's the ones that make you feel like you need to be watching them live and who prove themselves to be clip-worthy on social media that set themselves apart. I agree with this. That's modern media right now. You have to find the people that were able to kind of cut through all the noise in snippets and then bring you back because you want to hear more and be part of more. It's kind of a backwards way. The network used to promote it. Now social media promotes the network on their behalf. Pat McAfee's a master at this. They put out a bazillion great clips of him. It always draws people back, and it's kind of modern media now. Barstool kind of invented this at the forefront, and this is, I think, why they were a disruptor, and I think people didn't understand what they were doing outside of doing content initially that was kind of beyond the pale for the old school, journalistic integral, don't want to say those type of things, don't ruffle any feather groups. They were able to kind of do that, and they continue to do this with clips. They get people to come back to their content. They're masters at it. And then they went on to say this about Kelsey, awful announcer. He goes, if there was any question about whether that was ESPN's motivation in hiring Kelsey, it was quick inception of the aforementioned late night show, debuting at 1 a.m. Eastern time on Friday night, Saturday morning in the early January. They call it Late Night with Jason Kelsey. It aired 5 episodes in its initial run, which ultimately proved to be even less memorable than his presence on Monday Night Football. While the late night show was clearly a work in progress, perhaps the most curious aspect of it was how little ESPN seemed to promote it. Heck, outside of the initial announcement, you wouldn't have known Jason Kelsey had a late night show on ESPN based on the network's airwaves and their social media feeds. One could certainly question whether a late night show hosted by Jason Kelsey or any ex-athlete for that matter is a winning formula. Still, the reality is that the project isn't going to stand a chance without the ESPN machine behind it. I agree with that, but let's go back to the previous point that they're making and that I agree with, that the show needs to produce the type of things that get put out into the internet that draw you back to have to watch the show. Katie Nolan, when she started doing Garbage Time, was very, very good at this. They put out great clips from her show. It brought people back and it drew in an audience. Neither's happening here. The ESPN machine's not putting it out there, I think partially because I agree. I will say work in progress. I agree with the sentiment. Jason's done a nice job for them, but it's not a memorable job for them, and it's not a moving the needle job for them. And I also agree with, if you're going to do a late night show, that's a very difficult thing to do. It's not what ESPN's built for. They don't have entertainment producers, and he's not a comedian or a show host in that way. So can they teach him how to do it? Can it build that way? Maybe. But like, it was always going to be a reach that it was going to be a fit early as they tried to build the whole thing out. I go back to Travis now. Okay, so Jason Kelsey was brought into ESPN. He's not moving the needle, I think, the way that they had hoped that they would. It's his podcast that really moves the needle. He has moments. Travis with Jason moves the needle together. So is there a situation by which Travis looks at what's going on, whether, what does his career look like from here? Is it time to hang it up? And is it also time to catch up to Jason and help one another, like kind of build on what they already had, which was the beginning of the post-career trajectory in media through New Heights and other avenues, but bring it together. And so that's where I wonder where this is going with them. Now, is ESPN going to be willing to pay top dollar to bring Travis in to work with Jason? Do they have any possibility of securing the rights of New Heights? Probably not. So this may be all far-fetched and it might be too late, and these things may have already happened, and it may be too late to kind of clean that up and bring it all back together and bring them in as a package. But there is part of me that feels like Travis may retire and focus more on New Heights and his own entertainment career, ESPN or not ESPN, and that may be helpful for one another, and it may not, because solo shows, they may not be. We'll find out. All right, everybody, talk to you on Monday. Ray Watson Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.